Lord, I will lift up my song. I will praise your name. I will praise your name. When times of need carry on, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Though darkness falls all around, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. If I forget what I found, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider. You're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I'll love you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my soul. I will praise your name. I will praise your name. If I feel lost and alone, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Though I may labor in vain, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. Through all the heartache and pain, I will praise your name. I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider. You're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I'll love you, Lord. I'll honor. I will trust you, Lord. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship everything I say. I love you, Lord. I'll honor you. I'll trust, never let me go. I'll worship, never let me down. I'll love, forever I will love you. I'll honor, I'll trust every hour, every day. That's why I worship you. I'll praise you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my song. I will praise your name. I will praise your name.
Welcome, everybody. God bless you all. Today we have a stream with two special guests, two brothers that I'm a part of ministries with in different platforms. And our topic today is going to be about the child marriage in the Quran, the problem of child marriage. What we want to do is we want to give everybody one of the most obvious arguments, most obvious reasons to show Muslims that Islam cannot be from God because of this very obvious moral evil. And helping me do that today, we have our brother Adam Coptic and Paul Bishop, two brothers of mine that, as I said, we do ministries together on different platforms. I want to just give a quick advertisement for our brother Adam channel here before I introduce him to you guys. If you guys would like to subscribe to his channel, I'm going to give you guys the link now. Please do subscribe. This is his channel. You guys can see he's got a few videos out already. If you guys want to check it out, please do subscribe and click on notifications. So with that link being out there, you guys wanted to, if you guys want to subscribe and click on there, please do support our brother. I want to welcome Adam. Thanks for joining us, bro.
Oh, thank you, brother Jay. It's such a pleasure to be with you, and it's such we do serve together, and it's beautiful. And I'm so glad to be with you discussing this very important topic. And God bless everyone who's watching this.
Thank you, bro. And we also have our brother Paul Bishop as well. Thank you, bro, so much for joining us. God bless you. Welcome.
Thank you. God bless you guys, and it's a pleasure being here as well. It's an honor to serve alongside of you both.
Amen. Thank you so much, brothers. So what we want to do is we just want to kind of outline an argument that we think everybody can benefit from. And if you have Muslims that you're in contact with, Muslims that you know, and just anyone who just has any familiarity or any interest in knowing why the Quran cannot be from God, this is one of the top reasons, because everybody has this like prick in their conscience if you talk to them about child marriage. It's something that God has just instilled in us, in our conscience, that this is an evil, a child marriage, an adult with a child. This is something that's wrong. It's something that's evil. And this is something that the Quran actually teaches and permits. So what we want to do is we wanted to just lay out some arguments for you all so that you guys can use this information with Muslims. Let's say if you have ministries or you just have Muslim friends or whatever, Muslim colleagues. What we want to do is we want to make it very easy and accessible for you all. So what we want to do is we want to go over a couple of verses in the Quran. We want to go over some translations. Both Adam and Paul both speak Arabic, so we can get into different translations. What's the best translation? How to best understand this? And then what we're going to do is we're going to get into different commentaries and different sources that prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Islam teaches child marriage. And this is something that their God teaches in the Quran. And we're going to get into that with you all now. So thanks everybody for joining us. And that's my introduction. So let's just get right into it. One of the first things that we want to do, we want to get into chapter 33, verse 49. So when you're starting out this argument, the way you want to lay it out, we want to put it on the screen here. You want to read to them chapter 33, verse 49. So what I'll do is I'll read it, and then I'll get Adam and Paul. If there's anything to add after Adam, you guys can just both comment on this, and we'll talk about the purpose of bringing this up, why it's important to bring this up in the context. So chapter 33, verse 49. O you who have believed, when you marry a believing woman and then divorce them before you have touched them, i.e. consummated the marriage. So touching them meaning consummating the marriage, then there is not for you any waiting periods to count concerning them. So provide for them and give them a gracious release. Okay, so brother Adam, what's the importance of this verse in the topic? How does it relate to what we're going to be discussing today?
Oh yeah, thank you, brother Jay, for this. Yeah, this verse is very, very important because it tells us that there's a waiting period when there's a marriage and a divorce occurs, right? Now, the waiting period, as this verse suggests, is there if the marriage has been consummated, right? Because two people can get divorced before there's to be any consummation, right? And when that happens, there's not a waiting period, right? And so the waiting period is there when two people get married and when they consummate the marriage, right? And then they get divorced, there's a waiting period, right? Because when a consummation occurs, there might be pregnancy, and so they want to make sure that after 3 months, if there are no signs of pregnancy, then she can get remarried, right? And they can be sure that the person she remarries isn't the father, right, of the child she might have been pregnant with, right? And so this verse leads us right into the child marriage verse, right, known as the Surah 65, verse 4, Surah al-Talaq. In Arabic, it's called Surah 65. It's number 65, verse 4. And if we head there,
Okay.
it tells
Yeah,
us
just before we do though, before we head there
before
though,
we
I
get
just
there,
wanted
before we
to,
get there,
yeah, I just
yes,
wanted
yes.
just a quick summary for the importance of this. So thank you, brother Adam. Paul, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, or just kind of maybe summarize the point. What's the importance of this verse before we get to 65:4? Like, what are we trying to show the Muslims with this verse?
Sure. Actually, I think this is the foundation that we should build on, or to just clarify, because a lot of people will backpedal once you pull 65.4 and try to figure out what is the idda. The idda is clarified in 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 the Sunnah, but as well as clarified in this particular verse. Ibn Kathir actually tried to understand this verse in a certain way, because it says قبل أن تمسوهن, so it's before touching them. So this is why actually Ibn Kathir says this is not nikah wal wat. It means it's not nikah with actual intercourse. It's only a contract, because it's obviously the intercourse have not occurred yet. And he would later on explain that if you had intercourse or touched them, you would have to have iddah. So it's highly important to understand that iddah is obligatory. It's obligatory for if you touch or have intercourse with the wife, whomever it would be. So if you actually have al-aqd, which is the contract, but you have not touched them, then there will be no iddah. And Ibn Kathir argues that she's allowed to get married immediately. But if there's any um, sexual contact, then she's not allowed to get married immediately. She has to wait 3 months. It seemed to me that Ibn Kathir is also focused, as well as whether she's pregnant or not, on putting handcuffs on the wife or the bride that actually you contracted the marriage with. It seemed to me that he's putting handcuffs when when a husband actually had sexual contact with her. She would be obligated to wait 3 months at least. So that's the importance. Understanding what's the iddah, who is it for, and how long is it. Obviously, we'll find that out in 65.4. But I think these ones are continuously going to be brought up and continuously need to be discussed, and we have to rely on the Sunni and also the Shia understanding of iddah.
All right. Thank you so much, brother Paul and brother Adam. So just quickly, just summarize. The first point that you want to take the Muslim to is chapter 33, verse 49. And the thing that you want to specify, and you probably will hear Arabic terms, and we'll try to translate them. That's our hope, because we want to be able to communicate to everybody the really danger, the problem with this. So when you hear when Paul is saying, for example, idda, this is how they translate as the waiting period. So idda, waiting periods. Okay. This is the point of this verse. You want to show what is idda, or what is the waiting period for. It's for
Yes.
when you're getting a divorce, the woman who you consummate the marriage with. So there is intercourse. There's intercourse. So that's the main point. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to go to our main verse now, the verse that we are going to be focusing on.
Yes.
Chapter
Absolutely.
65, verse 4. And I'll do is I will just read it here and the translation, and then I'll pass it over to. We'll just stick to the order. We'll pass it to Adam, and then Brother Paul, if he wants to add any points or repeat the important things to summarize, we will. We'll go from there. Okay. So, and for those, sorry, let me just again. So here's the reference, chapter 65, verse 4, and here we go. So, and those who no longer expect menstruation among your women, if you doubt, then their period is 3 months. So remember, the period, idda, okay, is 3 months. And for those who have not menstruated, and for those who have not menstruated, and for those who are pregnant, their term is until they give birth. And whoever fears Allah, he will make for him of his matter ease. Okay, so Adam, this is our key verse here. Most people are probably familiar with this. What are we looking at here? What's the main thing to highlight? And also, we can get into the translation, the Arabic. We want to give people the clearest understanding of this, an explanation as we can. So if you want to, explain anything, Arabic to English, feel free. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, brother Jay. Yeah. So, what we take from this verse before going into the commentaries, right, is that it's under the surah or the chapter of Surah Al-Talaq in Arabic. It's called. It's the chapter for the divorce. It literally means divorce, right? And it's talking about those who get divorced. What should their waiting period be, right? Specifically in this verse, Surah 65, verse 4. And so it says that those people who يأسنا من المحيط, and those who are not menstruating anymore, right? If you doubt about them, then you should make them wait for 3 months after you divorce them, right? And here is the key point, right? That it says afterwards, right? وَاللَّائِي لَمْ يَحِدْنَ, and those who have not menstruated. This is the key point, right? That we should be focused on. But just to move forward and then to go back to this point, right? And for those who are pregnant, right? وأولاد الأحمال أجلهن أن يضعن حملهن ومن يتقي الله يجعل له من أمره يسرا. And so it's saying that those who are pregnant, their term is until they give birth, right? But to go back to the phrase, right, where it says وَاللَّائِي لَمْ يَحِدْنَ, and those who have not menstruated. It says that for those who have not menstruated, their waiting period is also 3 months, right? Now, like we said in the previous verse, there is no waiting period for people who get divorced without consummation, right? The waiting period is for people who get divorced having their marriage consummated. If they, consummated their marriage and get divorced, then there's a waiting period. And so this verse is talking about people who got married, consummated the marriage, and then got divorced, right? And it's adding here these key phrases, and those who have not menstruated. Now, those who have not menstruated can be either two types of people, right? It can be an older woman who doesn't menstruate for a variety of reasons, or it can be children, because children don't menstruate under puberty, right? Further on, after we move on from the verse and look at the commentaries, we will prove to you guys without a shadow of a doubt that this is talking about young girls, right? Young girls who haven't menstruated because they haven't reached puberty, right? And so for those young girls who haven't reached puberty, who haven't menstruated, their waiting period is 3 months, which means that they got married, their marriage was consummated, and then they got divorced. And therefore, this is a verse that tells us that pedophilia is allowed, right? Where you can get married to a young girl before she reached puberty, you can have sex with her, and then you can divorce her. And so, yeah,
Very disgusting.
very
Yeah,
disgusting.
this is the moral evil that should prick
Yes.
everybody's conscience when they hear this. Okay, brother Paul, was there any points you wanted to highlight or add to this before we go into the commentaries?
Sure, yes. The reason this argument is so important is because it's backed up linguistically, grammatically, and exegetically, and there is a full consensus, and I mean full consensus across the board in the Islamic nation on what this verse means and the permissibility of actually consummating the marriage with a minor that have not reached puberty. The very first thing that we need to identify in this verse, again, using these, let's say, paradigms, whether linguistically, grammatically, or scholarly, is identify the three different categories the Quran is actually describing. So the Quran describes three different categories and prescribe two different iddah. So in this single verse, يئسن من المحيض, the one have given up on menstruation, and the one have not reached puberty is 3 month iddah or waiting period. The one that are pregnant until they put their child or give labor. It's very important to understand that it describes three different categories and prescribe two different iddah.
Yes. Okay. So the three categories again: the women who are older and they no longer have their monthly cycles, they're in menopause. Then the second category are the children who have not menstruated. And Adam said that there's a possibility for another side category here, but we'll just make the third category now, which is pregnancy, the pregnant woman. Okay, so those are the three categories here. And now what we want to do is we're going to put Adam's screen up here now, and we're going to get into the commentaries. So obviously, you guys can see this is in Arabic. So if you want to screenshot this, you can screenshot it, and then for sure we're going to be translating this for you all. So. So Adam, why don't you begin? Why don't you share with us what you have on the screen here? What are we looking at?
Sure. Yeah, so what we're looking at here is Tafsir al-Tabari, who is known as Sheikh al-Mufassirin, the greatest of the Quranic exegetes, right? And interpreters, right, of the Quran. This is from an official Saudi website called quran.ksu.edu, right, .sa. So Saudi website that has the main tafsirs, right, like al-Tabari, al-Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, al-Baghawi, al-Sa'di, right? And so Tabari is the best and most well-renowned exegete of the Quran. He's the guy you go to for any verse, right? If you want to know information about. And what we want to do here is know what was the opinion of Al-Tabari and if he inserted any narrations from a companion of Muhammad or a tabi'een, right? Because Al-Tabari was known as a mufassir that uses athar, that uses sayings of the companions and tabi'in to explain away the verses, which is one of the reasons why he's one of the greats, right? Because he sought after these sayings from the companions and from the tabi'in to provide the most,
Just we
you
just want to
know,
provide your translation. So
yeah,
tabi'in, these are
yeah,
the ones who succeed the
students of the companion.
companions, the students.
Yes,
So we have
student.
these, right? Okay. So we just want to
Yeah.
give these different generations. He's
Mhm.
drawing it from the earliest Muslim sources.
Yes. And so here in this paragraph, right, which is talking about the specific key phrases that we're looking after, right, which it says واللائي يئسن من المحيط من نسائكم إن ارتبتم فعدتهن ثلاثة شهور, and those who haven't menstruated from your women, the waiting period is 3 months, right? If we take a close notice here, look at what he says here. وجل الله جل ثناؤه أيضا التي لم تحد الصغيرة 3 أشهر. And Allah has made it so for those who haven't menstruated from the young girls, a young girl, right? الصغيرة, right? 3 أشهر, 3 months. So for a young girl that's not menstruating, her waiting period is 3 months. And so here Al-Tabari is suggesting that this is for the young girl, right? Where it says, and those who haven't menstruated, this is for the young girl. As-Saghira, her waiting period is 3 months here, right? And if we scroll further down, he actually provides us with an authentic saying of Ubay ibn Ka'b here. Call it Ubay ibn Ka'b. So he says, حدثنا Abu Quraib, the narrators, right? Here's the chain. Abu Sa'ib, قال ثنا ابن إدريس, these are narrators, right? قال أخبرنا مطرف عن عمرو ibn Salim, قال أبي ibn Ka'b. Ubay ibn Ka'b is one of the premier companions, right? Who Muhammad actually named one of the four companions to take the Quran from, right? And he's actually the one who had two extra surahs. He had his codex had 116 surahs, right? Now, Ubay ibn Ka'b is a companion, right? And so look at what he says here. Ubay ibn Ka'b approaches Muhammad and tells him, Ya Rasulullah, O Prophet of Allah, إن عددا من عدد النساء لم تذكر في الكتاب الصغار والكبار. He's saying that a huge portion of women haven't been mentioned in the Quran, right? In the book, and those are the young girls and the virgins, and actually the older women. Sorry, والكبار. واللاتي الأحمال, and those who are pregnant, right? فأنزل الله واللائي يأسنا من المحيض من نسائكم إن ارتبتم. And so God reveals the verse and reveals here واللائي لم يحدن, واللائي لم يحدن, and those who haven't menstruated, which is a reply, right, for Ubay ibn Ka'b's request in regards to why Allah hasn't mentioned as-saghar in his Quran, right? And so this verse was revealed due to that reason. This was the reason why this verse was revealed, because of the
Wow.
young girls. Because Ubay ibn Ka'b was asking the Prophet. Oh, go ahead, brother. Sorry, brother
Yeah.
Jay.
Yes. This is
Oh,
amazing right here. What we have, um,
mhm.
this is very explicit that this is including the little children. So you're talking about
Yes.
divorcing
Mhm.
prepubescent girls. That's what this verse is about. This particular section of the verse, divorcing
Mhm.
prepubescent girls. And as we
Mhm.
established, these are not just prepubescent girls that you're divorcing, but ones that you've consummated marriage with, you've had intercourse with. So this is the disgusting, this is
Yes.
the filth, this is the evil. Um, and I think one of the points that Paul brings up a lot with this is that you can really go to any commentary, right, Paul? Maybe you can make the point here, but isn't it the case that basically every classical commentary agrees with what Adam is saying here?
Right. I mean, they could pick any classical commentary, and it's more likely to agree with it because I have been scanning through so many of them, and they all agree with exactly what Brother Adam is quoting from Al-Tabari and Asbab al-Nuzul al-Wahidi. It seemed to me it is completely irrefutable at this point exegetically, but I'll let Adam finish this and I'll um, comment on this a little bit more.
Okay, excellent. Okay, back to you, brother Adam.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's finish Al-Tabari because he still has a lot to say here. And so Al-Tabari also mentions here An al-Suddi, Suddi, one of the commentators of the Quran, right? Look at what he says here. فعدتها 3 أشهر, her waiting period is 3 months. واللائي لم يحدن بقى, right? And those who haven't menstruated, who are those? Oh, al-Suddi, right? Look at what he says. Al-Jawari, right? Al-Jawari. These are the Al-Jawari. Now, Al-Jawari, according to Islamic jurisprudence, Brother Jay, and to the audience who are listening, these are the young girls, right? And here we can go here to an Arabic lexicon. This is an Arabic lexicon called Al-Ma'ani. It's on the website almaani.com, right? A very respectful here Al-Ma'ani, right? I actually got the definition for it, Al-Gariya, right? Which is the singular form for Al-Gawari. It says, Al-Bint الصغيرة التي لم تبلغ فقهية, the young girl who hasn't reached puberty. Fakhiya here is jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence. And it can also mean al-ama, it can also mean a slave, right? A young slave or an old slave, right, and a young girl who hasn't reached puberty. And so going back to Tafsir al-Tabari here, they're actually making it now specific, right? That those who haven't menstruated, this part of the verse is talking about the young girls who haven't menstruated, right? And if we scroll further down, we also have an authentic chain going back to Qatada. Now, Qatada was a student of Ibn Abbas. He's a tabi'i. He's a student of the companions, right? And Qatada, in regards to that phrase about the waiting period for those who haven't menstruated, he says, وَهُنْ اللواتي قعد من المحيط فلا يحدن واللائي لم يحدن. And those who haven't menstruated, hun, they are al-abkar, the virgins. التي لم يحدن, al-abkar are the young girls who are also virgins, right, who haven't menstruated. Their waiting period is 3 months, right? And just to the last thing I wanted to say here about Tafsir al-Tabari, then we'll go to Ibn Kathir, but first we have to see what Paul has to, I want Paul to add to this, yeah, and then we'll go to Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Yeah, here it says, and this is another chain in regards to Al-Dahhak, who's one of the tabi'in, one of the students of the companions as well. He says, وَلَائِ يَأْسْنِ الْمَحِيدِ, the verse, right? وَلَائِ لَمْ يَحِدْنَ, right? And those who have not menstruated. لَمْ يَبْلُغُنَّ الْمُحِيدِ, those who haven't menstruated, right, and their waiting period is 3 months, right? And so here we, he says the jawari are the ones who haven't menstruated, right? It's the abkar. Al-abkar are young girls, right, or virgins who haven't menstruated. No, abkar are the young girls, right? Yeah. So yeah, this is talking about young children, right? He's now making it specific. Al-Tabari bringing all of these quotations that those who haven't menstruated are the young girls, right? Yeah, before we move on to Ibn Kathir as well, who is reaffirming the same commentary, I think we should pass it on to Brother Paul if he wants to add something, right, Jay? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, Brother Paul, anything you wanted to add or say? Go ahead.
Sure. So contextually, we ought to look at this a little bit further as well. Who's Ubay ibn Ka'b? Ubay ibn Ka'b is one of the 4 major huffaz of the Quran, the one that Muhammad authorized to take the Quran from. So he's a key figure in Islam, so to speak, and he would pretty much understand what's going on. The woman of the Medina was criticizing the fact that Muhammad forgot about a certain type of woman. And Surah Al-Baqarah, so chapter 2, verse 228, do not address the category of women that is mentioned in 65:4. So, and this what caused Muhammad to reveal this verse, disgusting verse to say the least. And that being said, so anyone wants to retract and say these are normal women that are actually have their menstruation, etc., and category 2, the ones that have not menstruated, then it would be redundant because it is in 228 chapter 2. And that all being said, I think it's necessary. This is an occurrence that happened at the time of Muhammad until not even 100 years ago, that this was a norm in the Islamic nations. And we can further discuss this, how there's fatawi or jurisprudences still ruling in the Islamic world and discussing this till today, that if this is okay or if it's not, if it's allowed to have sexual contact with children. It's highly disgusting and disturbing, but we'll take it step by step. And the challenge is to all Muslims, obviously, show us any classical exegete or mufassir that does not agree with this. Classical, not in the past 100 years or past 20 years, someone that found out this is highly problematic and decided to reinvent the wheel.
Right. Right. So this is a challenge for any of the Muslims, anyone who's learning these arguments, or you're just kind of refreshing the information and how to argue these points, or you just want to press any Muslims with this. What you want to do is you want to challenge them if they disagree with you on this interpretation, the one that we're giving, to show you any classical commentator, as Paul said, show any classical commentator who disagrees that this does not permit divorcing the prepubescent girl. So which necessarily means that there's marriage. So there's marriage to prepubescent girls. That's a challenge you want to give to any Muslim. And so right now what we're going to do is we're going to go to another commentary. We're going to go to Ibn
Mhm.
Kathir. So Brother Adam, why don't you take us to Ibn Kathir?
Yeah, but I just want to make a comment before we get there because I think I messed up a bit when I was talking about the labkar. Labkar can mean two things, right? It can mean young girls and virgins. Because I think I said, oh, young girls who are virgins. No, it's either young girls or it's either virgins, right? Now this couldn't have been virgins because there's consummation, right? So this is talking about young girls. Absolutely, yeah. Um,
Okay.
moving on to Ibn Kathir, right? Now, the reason why I also chose Ibn Kathir, you can choose any commentary, like Brother Paul said, right? They're all going to say the same thing. But I always love to present to my fellow Muslims Ibn Kathir and Al-Tabari because these are the best. These are the best of the best. They're known as Sheikh al-Mufassirin, the Sheikhs of Tafsir. And so, yeah, just to make it sort of like a summary to put things together, right? Instead of providing 100 commentaries, we can just show them Ibn Kathir and Al-Tabari, and then we'll show you also consensus, right? But yeah, moving on to Ibn Kathir here, as you can see, this is Ibn Kathir from the same website, the Saudi website, Quran.ksu.edu, right? Surah 65, verse 4. Look at what Al-Tabari says here. It
Ibn
says
Kathir.
here, وَكَذَا Ibn Kathir, sorry. Yeah, this is Ibn Kathir. Oh, yeah, sorry. Look at what Ibn Kathir says. يقول تعالى مبينا لعدة الآيسة وهي التي قد انقطع عنها الحيض الكبرية. So he's saying here that those people who haven't been menstruating because of their older الكبرية, right? Because she might be an older woman
Yeah,
for
the
certain
elderly.
reasons. She might
Yeah.
probably, yeah, exactly, the elderly. Her waiting period is 3 months, right? And he says here, وَكَذَا الصغار, and also the young girls who haven't لم يبلغن سن who haven't reached the age of menstruation. Their waiting period is 3 months as well. Wow. So he's saying, and also the young girls who haven't reached the age of menstruation, their waiting period is 3 months. وَلَهَذَا قَالَ, and because of that, the verse says, وَلَائِ لَمْ يَحِدْ, and those who haven't menstruated. And so he's saying here, those who haven't menstruated applies to the young girls who haven't reached the age of menstruation. Now, I also want to show you that the narration of Ubay ibn Ka'b, right? That we saw in Tafsir al-Tabari is also mentioned in Tafsir ibn Kathir, right? Because when we see narrations being mentioned in multiple commentaries, right, and major commentaries like Ibn Kathir al-Tabari, that means that they're authenticating that narration, right? From the same guy here, the same companion Ubay ibn Ka'b, right? Ya Rasulullah, there have not been a huge portion of women being mentioned like the young girls, right? And then the verse gets revealed for those young girls, وَاللَّائِ لَمْ يَحِدْنَ, and those who haven't menstruated, right? Uh, I don't know if we should stop here or not, Brother Jay, because I want to move on and show you the authentication of this narration from Al-Siyuti, right? Because Al-Siyuti tells
Okay.
us that this is Sahih, this narration. If should I move on or
Let's just go back up to the top one more time. I want to just highlight this point one more time. The first
here we go?
comment that
Oh,
Ibn
Al-Sughar.
Kathir is,
Here we go.
yeah. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to just direct the viewers to please just screenshot this, and you can just go back in the video. You can hear the translation that Brother Adam gave, but he's confirming here that this is about the young girls who have not reached the age of menstruation, and he's saying that this is the exact reason why this particular part of the verse was revealed. So he's confirming that the girls that have not menstruated here, the ones who have not menstruated here, are girls who have not reached puberty. And remember, based on chapter 33, verse 49, the one who you give the waiting period for, the iddah, the waiting period for, are the ones whom you consummated the marriage with. So these are prepubescent girls that are having consummation in marriage, and they're being divorced as prepubescents, and given the consummation, they're consummating in marriage, they're divorcing these. This is extremely disgusting, extremely evil. And we have a video that we'll share later on. Famous Muslim da'i, famous Muslim speaker who's confirming this exact interpretation. Just so Muslims can't accuse, Al-Tabari doesn't know what he's talking about, Ibn Kathir doesn't know what he's talking about. We're going to show you even modern Muslims who are confirming this very interpretation. So, yeah, Brother Adam, let's go and confirm this saying. Okay, maybe there might be a little bit of lag right now. Brother Adam, are you still there? Okay, Brother Paul.
Yeah. So I
okay,
want to
okay, yeah, he's
confirm
there.
that this is actually happening, right? So that people don't, because brother Jay.
Okay, Adam, I don't know if you can hear me right now, but we're experiencing some sort of lag.
I'm here. Hey,
Yeah.
can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, so hopefully we can get this issue worked out. Just as we do, we just want to repeat the points. Actually, maybe this is a good time to get to the video, and maybe it will provide Adam enough
Do you
time
mind
to
if
come
I
back.
mind if I actually say something that is important as well?
Yeah, please do. Go ahead, brother. I just didn't know if Adam's thing is going to come back or not. But yeah, go ahead. Let's see if this works.
Okay, so something that is important to notice as well, when you're reading the exegetes, the tafasir, what you're gonna notice, they're gonna mention as-saghira, as-saghr, fi sin, and a lot of people will mistranslate that. A lot of people will say young. That means she's just young, it's not prepubescent girl. That is incorrect. According to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, according to the consensus of the Sunni, and I'm going to stretch it perhaps to Shia, but I'm going to have to do a little bit more digging into this. You cannot call you cannot call a girl that actually reached puberty saghira. This is a consensus. And I'll read off the website. واتفق الفقهاء على أن الصغر في الشرع ينتهي بالبلوغ, which means that, and the jurisprudent, or the ones that actually produce jurisprudences, have conceded that the little ones in Sharia or law would end that terminology. Little one or young ones will end when they reach puberty.
Wow. So there you have the jurist speaking right there, that you cannot refer this term that's being used to women. Well, I guess, they're girls, because just because you're having a menses doesn't mean you're not a girl. We're just thinking in the Islamic terminology is very confusing. So the jurists are clarifying that this term, little ones or the small ones, cannot be applied to the ones who have reached puberty. Okay?
Precisely. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I had to do some thinking through that one because the Muslim definitions for these things are all over the place. So, but we got it there. We got it out. Okay. So, Brother Adam, we can see your screen, but let's see if we can hear your voice. Okay. Try to go ahead, brother.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Brother Jay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is this better? Awesome. There we go. All right. Yeah. So I wanted to the same narration that was provided in Al-Tabari and Ibn Kathir for Ubay ibn Ka'b, saying to the Prophet, what about those young girls, right? And the Prophet revealing this verse to him, saying that their waiting period is 3 months, which suggests that you can marry the young girls, consummate the marriage with them, and their waiting period will be 3 months. And those young girls who haven't menstruated, who haven't reached puberty, right? So it says here, this is from tafsir.com, This is تفسير الدر المنثور في تفسير بالمأثور السيوطي. السيوطي is one of the greats, right? He's a hadith scholar. He's also a mufassir, right? He's an exegete, one of the best, most amazing Islamic scholar, right? One of the very well-known scholars. Now look at what he says here. He says this narration, the same narration, right? The of Ubay ibn Ka'b. He says أخرج إسحاق ابن راهوية وابن جرير وابن المنذر وابن أبي حاتم والحاكم وصححه. And so he's saying here that this narration was compiled by Ishaq ibn Rahawiyah and Ibn Jurayr al-Tabari, right, the exegete, and Ibn al-Munzar, another scholar, and Ibn Abi Hatim, this is another scholar, and al-Hakim, and he authenticated it. Al-Hakim authenticated it and said it's sahih, وصححه. وابن مردوية والبيهقي في سننه, and also these other narrators in these other hadith books, and Ubay ibn Ka'b, right, on Ubay ibn Ka'b. Now I also want to tell people that here in this website it tells us this is a website hadith.islam-db. It's an encyclopedia of hadith, right, موسوعة الحديث, and this is a great website that tells us about the narrators and their grading, because there's the signs of men and there's the grading of men, right? Some men are strong narrators, some men are weak narrators, right? Now here it tells us that this Ubay ibn Ka'b is a Sahabi, he's a companion. I just want to share something, Brother Jay, in regards to companions. The saying of a companion is binding on Muslims, right? Like you can build jurisprudence, rulings based on just the sayings of a companion. And I want to read from an article on Islam Web, right? One of the biggest Islamic websites, if not the biggest Islamic website, islamweb.net, right? Where it talks about the saying of a companion, right? It says here, أما من حيث التأصيل, from the origin, right? From the root of the matter, قول الصحابي, the saying of a companion, is انتشر ولم يخالف, if it's a well-known saying and if it doesn't contradict another saying, فهو حجة, it is binding. وإجماع سكوتي, and it is known as a consensus by silence, right? Because no one contradicts the saying, right? And it says here, قال شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية, right? The Sheikh of Islam, right? The great Sheikh of Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah, right? Look at what Ibn Taymiyyah says in his book called مجموعة الفتاوي. من قال من العلماء إن قول الصحابي حجة, whoever from the scholars has suggested that the saying of a companion is binding, فإنما قاله إذا لم يخالفه غيره من الصحابة. It is a hujjah, it is binding if it does not contradict another saying from another companion, right? ولا عرف نص يخالفه, and there's no scripture that contradicts it. ثم إذا اشتهر ولم ينكره, and if it's a well-known saying and no one is denying it, كان إقرارا على القول, it is binding, right? وقال هذا إجماع إقراري, this is a unanimous consensus, right? And it says here, إذا عرف إنها أقروه ولم ينكروه, if the saying is known for it to not be for it to be accepted, right, and not to be negated, right? And if it and even if it doesn't, if it's not a well-known saying, وإما إذا لم يشتهر فهذا إن عرف, even if it's not a well-known saying and it's not spread, right, among the scholars, لم يخالفه, and there's no other saying that contradicts it, فهو حجة, it's binding. So the basic gist of this is that the saying of a companion is binding on Muslims if it doesn't contradict another saying from another companion. So what I want to show you is that Ubay ibn Ka'b, right, with a sahih chain to Ubay ibn Ka'b, is actually saying that this verse was revealed for the young girls who haven't menstruated. And like I showed you guys, the saying of a companion is binding on Muslims. And so the saying of Ubay ibn Ka'b in regards to this matter is binding on Muslims, right? They can build fatwa rulings on this. They can build jurisprudence rulings on this, right? It's actually the third source of Sharia law, right? Because of ijma' sukuti. This is considered a consensus by silence because there's no other saying that contradicts this, right? As I showed you guys. And so this is absolute proof, 100% proof that the verse is talking about young girls who haven't menstruated, right, Brother Jay? I would love for you and Brother Paul to comment, to add further comments before we move on to the consensus in regards to this.
All right, great. Thank you so much, brother. So this is another important point, that if you have a companion that says something, Muslims have this idea of a silent consensus, which basically means that they don't have to outright say, I agree with this, but the fact that they're not saying anything and they're not saying anything that contradicts it means that there's a consensus, there's an agreement on this. So we have this authoritative, these binding statements now to the Muslim community that this is the interpretation of the verse. And yeah, let's give it to Paul. Paul, go ahead, brother.
I quite honestly don't have anything to add at this point. But it's evidential that we see today again that the Muslim world is discussing and arguing still about this, and especially that with the evolution of communication and all this, that we now can look into their materials and look at these discussions, and it's a simple search. If you know Arabic, you will dig into this filth or this dirt easily. And I'm looking forward to Brother Adam to list all the consensus right now.
Yeah, let's get into it, brother Adam. Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm also excited. Before we get into it, I also I want the viewers to maybe take a look at this. This is Islam Web in the English version, right? I want to tell the people, show you the viewers that a consensus in Islam, in Sunni Islam, is binding on Muslims, right? It's considered the third source of Sharia law, of legislation. It's the source of legislation, right? And it's absolutely binding. So if you find a consensus of scholars, Muslims have to obey it, right? It's binding on them. It says here, consensus is one of the sources of legislation, an authentic reference to Muslim scholars, the four Imams, and others. Evidence for this is the saying of Allah the Almighty, which means, and whoever opposes the messenger after guidance has become clear to him and follows other than the way of the believers, we will give him what he has taken and drive him into hell. And evil it is as a destination. Therefore, if the believers maintain consensus over an issue, those who oppose are threatened with torment. Right? And so you cannot really oppose a consensus, right? You cannot oppose a consensus. It's binding on the Muslim. And here, this is another website, Islam Question and Answer, one of the biggest websites alongside Islam Web. Like I showed you, this is the English version, right? Scholarly consensus, ijma', as binding proof, and the first consensus that occurred in Islam, right? So look at here. It says, praise be to Allah. Firstly, consensus, ijma', is one of the most important sources of legislation that must be followed. It must be followed, right? There are several definitions of consensus. The favorite view is that of as-Subki, who defined it as follows. It is when there is a unanimous agreement among the scholars of the Ummah after the death of Muhammad during any era on some particular matter. End quote from Jama' al-Jami'i, annotated by Wali ad-Din al-Iraqi, which is known also as al-Ghayth al-Hami. There's a great deal of definitive evidence from the Quran and Sunnah for the fact that consensus constitutes binding proof, right? And so to show you guys, consensus is binding on Muslims. They cannot contradict it. It constitutes binding proof. It's the source of legislation and Sharia law, right? And so this is just like an intro for the definition of consensus and how binding it is on Muslims. Now, I want to move on to actually show you guys that there's a consensus on this. And here we have a modern
Sorry to
scholar.
interrupt you, Brother
Oh,
Adam.
go ahead.
Could you please clarify? These consensus now, they're still in effect today. They're not like, expired, let's say. They're not back in the past. They conceded or they came to a consensus, this is what it means. These consensus are effective today, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Like in any era, right? And it says here during any era. So if you get a consensus in the first century of Islam, it's still binding on the 21st century. If you get a consensus on if you had a consensus among the scholars on the 20th century, right, this past century, it's binding on Muslims on the 21st century. And so if you get a consensus during any era, it will always be binding on Muslims, and they cannot like contradict it or do something to oppose it. It's there, right? It's there for forever, right, until Judgment Day. And so yeah, it's during any era. If there's a consensus, halas, it's a closed book. They have to
Wow.
follow it.
Even though it's criminal today, and it's hunted by the
Yes.
police, and
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
just making sure.
Oh yeah.
So this is
absolutely.
Islamic law.
Yes.
This
This is Islamic law.
well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's continue on, brother. Let's see.
Yeah.
You're about to show us the consensus now. Let's see it.
Yes. And so here I'm going to show you two websites for the consensus, right? This is the official website of a contemporary scholar called Sheikh Saleh Al Fawzan, right? Sheikh Saleh Al Fawzan is the greatest contemporary scholars living in Saudi Arabia right now. He's actually part of the Council of Fatwas, Dar al Ifta', right? The Council of Fatwas for Saudi Arabia. And so he's like one of the premier scholars living today, making fatwa rulings even for the royal kingdom of Saudi Arabia, right? So he's one of the scholars in the upper echelon, right, of scholars, right? And look at, he wrote an article here actually about this issue in 2017, just 5 years ago, right? In regards to tazwij as-saghira, the marriage of a young girl without puberty, before she reaches puberty, from someone who's from min kaf sa'ir ijma'an, from someone who is capable, right? And he says here ijma', this is an ijma', right? So let's get into his article here. In the middle here, he actually quotes the verse, right? وَاللَّائِي يأس من المحيض من نسائكم إن ارتبطتم فعدتهن 3 أشهر واللائي لم يحض. And those who are not menstruating from your women, if you're afraid their waiting period is to be 3 months, and those who haven't menstruated, right? He says here, أي الصغيرات, and those are the young children, التي لم يبلغن, who haven't reached the age of menstruation, right? فعددهن, and so their waiting period is 3 months. مثل يأسات من المحيط, like those who are not menstruating, the elderly women, right, who reached menopause, right? So they're exactly like the people who haven't reached menopause. He says here, فهذا دليل من القرآن, this is evidence from the Quran على إن الصغيرة, that the young girl تزوج وتطلق, if she gets married, the young girl who hasn't reached puberty, gets married, gets divorced, وتلزمها العدة, and she needs to have this waiting period, right? وقد دلت السنة على ذلك. And the sunnah of the Prophet actually provides proof for that. So due to the fact that he married, فقد تزوج النبي عائشة, he married Aisha when she was 6 years old, right? ودخل بها وهي بنت 7 سنين. فهذا دليل من السنة, and so he married her when she was 6, and he consummated the marriage when she was 9, and so this is evidence from the Sunnah in regards to this. وقد أجمع, right? And he says here, and there's a consensus among the scholars على جواز ذلك, right? وقد أجمع العلماء على جواز ذلك, and he says here, and the scholars are in a unanimous consensus in regards to this matter, that the young girl could get married and have sex, consummate the marriage, and get divorced, and have a waiting period, and all of that before she menstruates and reaches the age of puberty. And he says here actually that this is proof from the Sunnah of the Prophet, that when he married Aisha, right, at 6 years old, and consummated the marriage at 9, and so he's saying that, oh, Aisha was a young girl, she fits that description of those who haven't menstruated, right, when Muhammad consummated the marriage. There's also another source I want to provide, but before we go to this other source, do you want to add something, Brother Jay or Brother Paul? This is Sheikh Saleh Al Fawzan, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a very clear statement from him that this is the consensus on so many points. But I mean, honestly, there's not much to add to it. This is just exactly as what we've been saying. He's confirming it. and he's showing us that this is the consensus, which means what? Which means that it's authoritative, it's binding for all of the Muslims. Yeah. So Paul, anything, brother, or should we go to the next point to show the consensus?
Yeah, actually, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. The West is trying to fight pedophilia, and we have Islam permitting it and allowing it. Mind-boggling.
Yeah, exactly. This is something that I think if you talk to anyone about, and by the way, if you even talk to Muslims about this, and you present a scenario to them where it involves like a hypothetical that involves child marriage, your average Muslim is going to be against this because God gave them a conscience. Most Muslims do not know about this, all despite the fact that this is a consensus, despite the fact that this is taught in the Quran, it's taught in the Sunnah, it's taught by the companions. It's right. This is, there's a solid consensus there amongst the companions, and then it's taught throughout their literature through the ages. We've gone through commentaries that really go through a wide range of different dates that they're all saying the same thing. So your average Muslim doesn't know about this. Your average Muslim is going to be just as disgusted and thinking that it's evil. That's a prime opportunity to show them what the religion actually teaches, and then presents you with an opportunity to give them the gospel, the truth, the true message of God. So yeah, brother Adam, why don't we go on to this last point of consensus here, and then we'll see where to go from there.
Yeah, but also to mention this, like the purpose of this article, Brother Jay, was to show the consensus, right? Because he even has it ijma'an. So he says that the child marriage, the young girl getting married, there's an ijma' for it. So this article was written to prove the ijma', and he even lists that the ulama, the scholars have a consensus in regards to this issue. Also, something that is important here that I did stress, but not maybe enough, is that a proof for why this verse is talking about the young girls is because of what Muhammad did with Aisha, where Aisha was a young girl, and so Muhammad did consummate the marriage with Aisha before she reached puberty, because the waiting period would have applied to Aisha if she would have gotten divorced, as this verse applies to Aisha, which means that the marriage must have been consummated with Muhammad and Aisha for there to be a waiting period for Aisha if she would have gotten divorced. And so if this verse applies to Aisha, that means that Muhammad consummated the marriage before she reached puberty. Now,
Right, exactly. And we also have another line of evidence for that as well. If we have enough time to get into that as well, we'll go to Al-Bukhari as well for this point. But even if we don't, we have enough evidence here. But yeah, let's continue on. Go ahead, brother.
oh yeah, brother, we'll absolutely go to Al-Bukhari. If you want, we can do it right now, but let's finish this with the Ijma and then go to Al-Bukhari, where also confirms that the verse applies to the marriage of Muhammad and Aisha before she reached puberty. The consummation took place, right? This is from Sahih Al-Bukhari, right? Now here, this website, Islam Q&A, this is the Arabic version, right? It talks about the ijma as well. A questioner asks about the child marriage, right? And here's their answer, right? أولا, firstly, right? ذهب جماهير العلماء إلى صحة زواج الصغيرة قبل البلوغ, saying here that the masses of scholars, right, the great majority of scholars have agreed that child marriage is permissible before puberty, before the girl reaches puberty. Right? وقد نقل كثير من العلماء الإجماع عليها. And it says here that many scholars have narrated a consensus in regards to this, have said that this is a consensus, right? ولا يعرف مخالف لهذا الإجماع إلا ابن شبرمة وعثمان البتي. He's saying here no one has contradicted this ijma' in the past 14 centuries, right? 1,400 years, except two people, right? Only two scholars, Ibn Shabrama and Uthman al-Batti, right? Probably these were contemporary scholars, that's why. But only two scholars in the history of Islam said that this is not child marriage, right? That this is not pedophilia. All of the other scholars have said that this is absolutely talking about young girls who haven't menstruated, and a lot of scholars have said that this is an ijma', and they narrated a consensus about this. Yeah, and it says here, من أدلة الجمهور, and the evidence that the great majority of scholars have used is that verse, Surah 65, verse 4, right? Surah Al-Talaq, verse 4. ووجه الاستدلال بآية من الله تعالى ذكر عدة المطلقة الصغيرة قبل الحيض. It says here that this verse has been used to say that there's a waiting period for a divorced young girl before menstruation. وهذا يعني إنها غير بالغة, and this means that she didn't reach puberty, right? So it's saying here that those who haven't menstruated, the young girls, haven't reached puberty. So the marriage was consummated. She got divorced. Her waiting period is 3 months, and all of that while she still did not reach puberty. And so yeah, this is incredible. Now, what I want to do, brother Jay, what I want to do is this.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we can go to we can go to two places right now, brother Jay. The age of
Okay.
15, right, for Aisha, showing that it was based on Aisha reaching puberty at 15 years old. Then we can go to Al-Bukhari, or we
Right.
can go to
I think that's a great order to do it in. Yeah, because what we're going to see now is the Muslim scholars agreeing that Aisha did not reach puberty
Mhm.
by the time she married Muhammad and consummated the marriage. That she was
Yes,
still pubescent when the marriage was consummated. So
yes,
we can go to that one, and then we can show from Al Bukhari itself, the hadith
right.
collector himself, that this actually is the case.
Yes. So, Brother Jay, in regards to the consummation of Muhammad with Aisha before she reached puberty, there is so much evidence for this other than this one, right? So, we can do another episode for this where we can show you that she was playing with dolls, and playing with dolls is not allowed in Islamic
Right.
jurisprudence, except
Right.
for young girls who haven't reached puberty, right? So, this is one of the reasons why she didn't reach puberty. There's also another reason why that gives us a definitive, clear proof that she didn't reach puberty at the consummation of Muhammad. This is for another presentation for another time, right? Because now we're just discussing Surah 65, verse 4, child marriage in particular, right? And so going to this website, Islam Q&A as well, right? This is the English version. Uh, this article is talking about the age of puberty in Islam and why they chose it to be that age, right? Which they claim is a reflection of Aisha's age when she reached puberty, right? So if we go here, it says, according to the Shafi'is and Hanbalis and Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, these are different schools of jurisprudence, right? Among the Hanafis, puberty is reached for both males and females when completing 15 years of age, right? And it says here, Al-Mawsu'a al-Fiqhiyya, the Encyclopedia of Jurisprudence, right? We should point out that, no, sorry, here in this paragraph, right? Just to summarize things. Based on that, what Hafiz ibn Hajar, may Allah have mercy on him, said about Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, reaching puberty at the age of 15 is the view of the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, like what we pointed out here. The Shafi'is and the Hanbalis saying that the age of puberty is 15 years, right? Because of Aisha, right?
So
Uh,
they're basing it on Aisha, and they're saying that she reached puberty at the age of 15, which means that when
yeah,
Muhammad consummated the marriage, what it
yeah,
means that she was prepubescent. So
yes.
we're going to see how this passage, how this verse in the Quran, chapter 65, verse 4, plays into that. But we can also glean some other information from this. So let's continue.
Hmm. Yeah. So based on that, what Hafiz ibn Hajar, right? Of course, Ibn Hajar, the Prince of Hadith, known as the Prince of Hadith, right? Said about Aisha, reaching puberty at the age of 15 is the view of the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis. By the way, the marriage was consummated when she was 9 years old. And so for 6 years, he was having sex with her while she didn't reach puberty. And of two senior scholars of the Hanafi madhab, there's nothing strange about that in one way. And on the other hand, it is not denying that puberty may be reached before that age, taking into account that there is some considerable difference of scholarly opinion concerning this age, whether it may be used as a basis of an argument. This is not the place to discuss that matter, right? So what they're saying here is that Aisha reached the age of puberty at the age of 15. That was the opinion of Hafiz ibn Hajar, also the opinion of the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, and two senior scholars of the Hanafi madhab. And that's why they said that the age of puberty is 15 years for both men and women because of Aisha. The reason was because of Aisha reaching puberty at the age of 15. Now, Brother Jay, we should move on to Al-Bukhari, where he gives us like the
Yes.
seal, the icing of the cake for this. Yeah,
Yeah, the icing on the cake. Yeah.
yeah, where
Okay.
he just proves us that this verse applies to Muhammad's marriage to Aisha before she reached puberty, the consummation, right? And
Right.
so Al-Bukhari was there's something called in Arabic Tabweeb al-Bukhari, right? Which means the chapters of Al-Bukhari. The way Al-Bukhari organized his hadiths that he compiled is that he put them in chapters, right? And in these chapters, he would put relevant verses from the Quran that he saw fit with these hadiths, right? And so here, if we take a look at chapter 39, right, which says giving one's young children in marriage, he actually inserts this verse, Quranic verse, right, which he saw fit with the hadith that he inserted right under it in the same chapter 39, right? And so the verse is Surah 65, verse 4, right? قوله تعالى واللائي لم يحد, and those who haven't menstruated. وجعل عدتها ثلاثة أشهر قبل البلوغ. And so he made her waiting period 3 months before puberty. And so he inserted the verse here with the commentary that her waiting period is 3 months before puberty. And look at what he does. He then inserts the hadith of Muhammad marrying Aisha at 6 years old and consummating the marriage when she was 9 years old. Here, that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. And then she remained with him for 9 years till his death. So what Al-Bukhari is telling us here is that the Quranic verse, and those who have not menstruated, Surah 65, verse 4, it applies to Muhammad's marriage to Aisha, which means that Aisha was one of those young girls who haven't menstruated at the time of consummation. And if she would have gotten divorced, her waiting period would have been 3 months before she reached puberty. And that was
Exactly.
the opinion of Imam al-Bukhari. Yeah, the
Right.
greatest scholar. Yeah, go ahead, Brother Jay.
So here we go. We have from Al-Bukhari himself stating that Aisha would have fit into this ruling if she were to be divorced, that she would have been in this particular category of those who did not menstruate because she was prepubescent. So it just once again just confirms to us that this is the correct interpretation, that this is exactly what's going on here. And this is so disgusting, it's so sick, it's so evil. So we're going to get into some of the Shia sources as well. Mostly we're covering obviously the Sunni or the Sunnah, but we're going to get into the Shia as well. So any comments, Brother Adam, before we go to that?
Yeah, so just to provide like a conclusion or a summary to this, this verse, I got to the best commentators, which is Al-Tabri and Ibn Kathir, saying that this is about young girls, right? Then we moved on to a Sahabi, a companion, saying that this is about the young girls. And the saying of a companion I showed you is binding on Sunni Muslims. Then we moved on to a consensus. Sheikh Saleh al-Fawzan, who's the greatest contemporary scholar in Saudi Arabia, said that this is a consensus among the scholars throughout the centuries that this verse is talking about young girls who got married, got consummated, got divorced. The waiting period is 3 months, right? Before they reached puberty, even. All of this happening to them. Then we moved on to a very prestigious, one of the biggest websites, Islam Q&A, saying that a lot of scholars have said that this is a consensus, that this verse applies to young girls who haven't menstruated. And we showed you also Al-Bukhari agreeing that this marriage between Muhammad and Aisha happened before Aisha reached puberty, and providing the verse وَاللَّائِي لَمْ يَحِضْنَ, and those who haven't menstruated, to suggest that this is talking about young girls, and the marriage of Muhammad and Aisha applies to this verse, right? And so what I also want to finish this off with is that this is irrefutable evidence what we provided you in two ways. The saying of a companion, like I told you, is binding, and also consensus, which is the third source of Sharia law and legislation. And so no Sunni Muslim can contradict a saying of a companion, nor the consensus of scholars. And so due to these two sources of Sharia law and legislation, they tell us that this verse, Surah 65, verse 4, is absolutely talking about young girls who haven't reached puberty, and there's no denying this, and no one can refute this. It's binding
Wow.
on Muslims. Yeah.
Extremely conclusive, and it should just really be something like that just disgusts people, that this filth, that this evil is like, this is something that they believe is really from God. Like, it's amazing to me. This is one of the ultimate proofs to show that this cannot be from God, because this goes against anyone's conscience. Anyone that you're talking to, they're going to be saying, I mean, with rare exception, maybe there's some people that are very, very evil people in the world, but most of the people in the world are going to be against this. So without knowing it, they're against Islam. And once you get a Muslim to admit to that, then you're on the way out of Islam at that point, and you want to welcome them to warm them up to. Oh, sorry, we have Brother Paul back. We'll bring him in a second. Okay, great. Yeah. So then, of course, at that point, what you want to do is you want to introduce them to the gospel. That's the main goal with all of this: to tear down Islam, show them the evil of Islam, and then show them the beauty of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So Paul is going to get us into the Shia sources. So Paul, if you're ready to do that. If not, we can get to a video where we show a Muslim speaker who's confirming the very point that we've been making this whole time.
Sure. I just want to give the confidence for anyone that want to argue this against Islam. This is applicable to any Muslim, regardless what kind of Muslim you are, even the Shia. So we need to get into the fact that if we want to look at what Shia regard as prepubescent marriage and the rulings on it, we ought to look at the biggest nation that contains Shia, and that would be Iran. Iran would be approximately about 80 million, perhaps, Shia, and they have a mufti. We have Sistani and Al-Khomeini, the most respectable scholars and mufti, and their names or titles are a few phrases. They're not just Al-Imam Al-Khomeini. Then it goes on and on, Ayatollah, etc., etc. And just to understand the caliber of Al-Khomeini and Sistani is try to imagine the bishop of an entire country, or in a more analogous to it, perhaps, the Pope. So this is the caliber. This is the caliber of this particular person, and that wrote a book, both of them, and in Al-Khomeini. And I think this is, you think that wasn't discussed enough? Wait till you hear this, Brother Jay. It's hard for me to read, and it's hard for me to even translate. This is from...
Yeah, we need a very G-rated translation.
Okay.
Obviously, we can't change the Arabic, but for the translation, we'll need to have it very G-rated.
Okay. So the book that Al-Imam Al-Khomeini, that's Mufti Iran, he's no longer there, but he wrote a book called Tahrir al-Wasil, and it is Juz' 2, which is part 2, or volume 2, volume 2, page 41, sorry. Precisely, issue 12. And I'll send the link, and you can perhaps post it. Do you want me to do that right away while I'm talking?
You can read it first, and then afterwards you send me the link, and I'll share it in the chat. No problem.
You bet. Okay. لا يجوز وطء الزوجة قبل إكمال 9 سنين دواما كان النكاح أو منقطعا. It's not allowed to have intercourse with a wife before 9 years old, continuous or continuous intercourse or on intervals. وأما سائر الاستمتاعات كاللمس بشهوة والضم والتفخيذ فلا بأس بها حتى في الرضيعة. But for the rest of the enjoyment, such as touching with desire, hugging, and thighing, there's no issue with that. Even with a breastfeeding baby.
Wow.
The term
Wow.
the term thighing is the most disgusting part of this as well. I can't gyrate that. Honestly, I just can't. If you really want to know what that means, use the worst kind of imagination and think of thigh-in. So that being said, it goes on and talks about the damage that you could possibly cause if you have intercourse with a girl before she reached 9 years old, and the fact that if you damage her, there will be no legal ramification to that. So
Wow.
like it goes on and on and on. But the permissibility of thighing a toddler, or not even a toddler, a breastfeeding baby, is disgusting enough. If you think
Such
that,
evil, man. Wow.
yeah, if you think that Shia are better, this is something they have to address. And again, if any Shia would say, "Oh, I don't believe in Al-Khomeini, and Khomeini, I don't have to follow him," sure, you're absolutely right. But here's the problem. Why did Al-Khomeini use 9 years old as a benchmark? Why did he say before 9 and after 9 in this passage? And what's the significance of 9 years old? It's obviously not puberty.
Right. It's not a random number either, right?
Yeah,
There's a reason
exactly.
why.
There's a reason. We can speculate why, and we possibly know why. But also, why all the muftis of Iran agreed with this and not, because we just mentioned the silent consent or the silent consensus that conceding to a point, you only have to be silent about it. Till today, not even a single mufti at the same caliber of Al-Khomeini or Sistani came out and said, "Hey, by the way, these guys didn't know what they were talking about. You know, it's a mistake. It's an honest mistake, guys. Let's move on." That never happened. Again, imagine of the caliber of the Pope. Let's say, God forbid, a Pope would actually say that having sex with children is okay. And then no Pope that came after him ever corrected that notion. Then that notion is still valid till today. If that makes sense. But we noticed that the church, when they did wrong, they immediately came out and said, "We did wrong here. We apologize." Till today, the Shia ought to be held responsible for issuing such a fatwa, just like they issued 30 years ago a fatwa on Salman Rushdie and got executed recently. And I'm just giving you an example of how effective a fatwa is. I'm not trying to change topics.
No, it's a very valid point. Yeah. It's in other words, they can make a fatwa and it's binding, right? That's the point.
Correct. It is binding. And if no one else that follows that fatwa and say this fatwa is no longer valid, or if it's still binding, it's still in effect.
Yeah. Okay, so we covered the Sunni Muslims, we covered the Shia Muslims, and right now we're going to give it to a Sunni Muslim, a popular Muslim speaker, to address the Quran-only Muslims. Here we go. We'll play this video briefly, and then we will wrap up the stream.
Chapter 65, verse 4. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us who you can divorce and who you cannot divorce. وَاللَّائِ لَمْ يَحِدْنَ, and the ones who had never been pubescent before. Actually it says لَمْ يَحِدْنَ. They never had puberty before. You can't go around that. The Quran doesn't say anywhere in the Quran that the woman has to be pubescent. So if you're Quran alone, you're allowed to have sexual intercourse with 5-year-olds. Get me one verse in the Quran which says the woman has to be pubescent.
Wow. So he's debating with Quran only Muslims there. He obviously is very ignorant of his own tradition, or he's lying. But it's very clear that the Sunni sources that Brother Adam shared and the Quran itself, which we first looked at, and then what Paul just cited, which I will post a link for now in the chat. And then we have Muhammad Hijab giving the same exact arguments, based on the Quran itself for the Quran alone Muslims. So any Muslim is faced with this evil because it's in their own book. And so yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? Muslims, please see this evil, repent of this evil, leave this evil, and come to the Lord Jesus Christ, who said that. What did the Lord Jesus Christ say about the children? He said that if you offend one of these children, you cause them to sin, the ones who believe in Him, it would be better for you to throw a milestone around your neck and to basically throw yourself into the ocean. That's what Jesus said, that if you cause them to sin. So Jesus loved the entire creation. If you actually love children, you will try to leave Islam, and you'll try to direct people to this information so they can see the warnings that Islam has for children and for themselves as well, the evils in it. So yeah, Brother Adam, maybe if you want to give a kind of like maybe a summary, and then maybe just kind of a closing point, any points you want to give to anybody before we head out, and then we'll give it to Paul for a conclusion as well, and then we'll just wrap up with this. And yeah, go ahead, brother.
Thank you
Okay,
to Brother Paul Bishop and to everyone who's listening. I just want to say, Brother, that we presented, yeah, Brother Jay, can you, yeah, that we presented to you guys from the Sunni sources and the Shia sources and the Quran only source, that this is binding, that this is absolutely binding on Muslims from all fronts.
Brother Adam, the sound is breaking up
Right.
again.
That Allah.
Okay. Yeah, Brother Adam, unfortunately, brother, the sound is breaking up. Why don't we give it to Paul? Paul, if you can just make a conclusion, maybe a summary. It doesn't have to be any type of length, just whatever you want to say to kind of wrap up. And then hopefully Adam's sound will be working and we'll pass it to him after.
Sure, you bet. The common objection we get with this is an attack on your person. So if you're going out and using these arguments today, tomorrow, or whatever, you'll notice a common pattern. The pattern is they will attack you. They'll never address this, because this argument is irrefutable linguistically, grammatically, exegetically, with consensus. This is the most powerful argument that you can possibly use against Islam, because there's no way out of it. Absolutely not. And they will always appeal to something that is not founded in any truth. So I hope you have enough confidence today to actually perhaps use it in the near future. If not, you also have the moral duty of sharing this information with others. Because if Islam is actually permitting pedophilia, you have the moral duty to raise awareness and perhaps share the cause of making it illegal. Because I cannot reconcile this with any constitution that wants to protect the children. I could not wrap my head around this. And it doesn't matter what kind of Muslim they are. As you noticed, Quran only is stuck in the same dilemma. Shia have their scholars calling for thawing of babies. The Sunnis consummating an intercourse with a prepubescent girl is 100% allowed. There's no way around this. I thank you, Brother Jai and Adam. You guys are very thorough, and may God bless you.
Thank you, brother. God bless
Brother,
you. Yeah, brother Adam, let's see if your sound's working now. Go ahead, Josh.
voice is good. Awesome. Yeah, I just want to also say that, like, what we presented to you guys is irrefutable evidence, right? That pedophilia is prescribed in Islam. Now, truly believe that this necessarily debunks Islam, right? Because how can you have an all holy God prescribing something that modern day science, right, is saying is a sexual disease? It's a mental disease, pedophilia, right? And also, this necessarily debunks the prophethood of Muhammad, because how can you have a prophet who's a pedophile? Right, you cannot really have a pedophile prophet, as we showed you, Muhammad had sex with the marriage, with her strongest arguments that destroys Islam and the prophethood of Muhammad. May the Muslims who are listening to this, may their eyes be open, their hearts be open to the truth and to the love and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ. All glory to him. Thank you, brother.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Brother Adam Coptic and Brother Paul Bishop. I just posted in the chat Adam Coptic's channel. If you guys would please subscribe. Let me just post the link just one more time. Of course, brother, we want to promote your channel, and we would love to get you, subscribers and support from everyone that we can. So we have on the screen here Matthew chapter 18, verse 6. Jesus says here, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him if a milestone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea." Now, this is Allah who's causing these little ones to sin. He's causing these little ones to be in this evil, disgusting situation. This is Islam. And obviously, there are much greater application to this, but specifically, we're making an application to Islam, to Muhammad, and as has been stated over and over and over again, that this is an evil that no one should defend. And I think it'll be very, very rare to find a Muslim who actually does defend this. Most of the time, they'll just say that this is not true. This is not what our sources teach. But you guys are now equipped with all the information from the Quran, many commentaries. We could have gone to scores and scores more, but then we went to the consensus and many other references for Sunnis, for Shia, and Quran only as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we just wanted to encourage you all to share this information with in mind that, all the time when you're sharing the gospel, when you're sharing this information, you always want to share it with the gospel as well. As it says, the famous John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life." And that's our wish and our hope, that all these Muslims would leave Islam and come to the Lord Jesus and believe in him. And we want to end it there tonight. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we just really appreciate Brother Adam and Brother Paul. So we'll thank you all. Thank you all for joining us, and God bless you all, and have a great rest of your days or nights wherever you are in the world.